Hello everyone, this is Cross. What I'd like to talk about today is my Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition campaign. This is journal entry number 4. We are going to discuss session number 4. This is the part of the story that I would consider the first chapter, the first arc, the first whatever. What we had done in the past, the last 3 episodes is the prologue. This is the introductory to the campaign. We're going to show you a few things about how to interface with this campaign, how to play the game, how to work with what's available to you. This is a heavy sandbox campaign. This is what I would define as sandbox. Being that I, as the DM, am in control of the world. I'm telling the players what the world is doing, and it is their responsibility to interact and figure out what they want to do. Now, some jobs are easier to obtain. As they've noticed, there's notice boards that they can go to and pick a job off of a board and go investigate and see what it's all about and determine whether or not they want to do that. Great, and that's one way of doing it. The other ways are they can interact with these NPCs, figure out what their hopes and desires are, and if that sounds interesting to them, if they can strike a deal, then great, they can do those jobs. But ultimately, from week to week, I have no idea what these characters are going to do. In designing this world, I do not at all think about the player characters in designing what the world is doing. Then I set that aside and look at the player characters' backgrounds and see, okay, how is this background interfacing with my world? And then how is their background progressing? What in their background needs to develop as part of the story? And then integrate that on top of the world, so that now the background is messing with the world in a way. Sometimes very directly, sometimes very indirectly. Is their background heavily influencing the world, or is it really not influencing it at all? In the previous episode, we had an incident where Clara was shot by someone from her background who was just laying in wait, ready to ambush the entire party. It turned out he had different motives. But how does this character existing in Rye Hill affect Rye Hill? Well, a couple of the NPCs said, hey, this guy that was looking for you. And I told him I didn't know where you were at the moment, but you had gone into the Timberwood. You should be back, at some point. That's how he was able to know where the party was, is that through casual conversation, the NPCs revealed that they had talked to her and the general direction that she went. That was all that he needed. The assumption being that she would come out of the same location. Let's talk about that for a second. What if the characters took a different path back to the city? Well, that would have changed everything. Everything. That character, that NPC, is expecting, quite reasonably, that Claire is going to make the trip back the same way she went in, and he's going to execute his plan. If the characters didn't do that, which they had every opportunity not to do that, then that whole scene would have played out completely different. And that's the kind of things that you should keep in your mind, is if you're trying to run a semi-realistic story, or at least a believable story, is how did this NPC acquire this information? Well, I know that. They don't know that yet, so I'm not going to tell you. Not yet, anyway. But that's how my stories are constructed. So from a storytelling standpoint, there's a bunch of different threads being run, and they're all happening at the same time. Some of them are known, some of them are unknown. But the important thing is when you have an idea, integrate it into the world and let it continue. How is this story going to work out with no player involvement? I've asked that question before. You know, how does this play out? I currently have a storyline running that has 0 player involvement. It was introduced to the players, the rescue of Elena Reinhardt. The players were introduced to this problem. They decided it wasn't their business. Maybe that was the right call. Maybe it wasn't. However, that storyline, they chose not to ask any more questions or do anything else about it. They were on their own mission. They were dealing with their own business, which, I mean, rightfully so. The guards seemed like they had a good handle on it. Did they? We don't know. We'll find out. However, that storyline is currently continuing on and being worked on with no player involvement. And when if the players return to Rye-Hill, maybe they'll see what happened to that story, you know, so they'll come in and see the results. A lot of the stories are being run with this method. So they decided to travel west to Lesage, 6.5 days. There's a couple of different ways to do this. 6.5 days later, you reach Lesage. There you go. That's a very easy way of getting the players from point A to point B and continuing on with this story. And essentially this method is, I'm going to focus on this one aspect of the story. This is the job you guys picked. We're going to focus on that job from start to completion. Then we'll do another job, focus on that, start to completion, and so on and so forth. There's nothing wrong with that. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. That is a great organizational style for DMing. What I've chosen to do is something not necessarily better, but maybe a little bit more complicated. And that is run all these stories at the same time. Everything's happening at the same time. So it, you know, and then it creates this little bit more of a living, breathing world where the players maybe feel like they're in the world and getting to see a lot of these things progress. There are these problems that are happening that were there before they got there, and maybe will be there long after they're gone. We'll see. We chose to kind of do the more day by day thing. You know, let's talk about each day as it progresses. Let's go on the journey. If you go on a road trip, if you get in your car and, you know, travel cross country, you're going to be talking about all the stops you made along the way as well as the final destination. In fact, you probably spend a lot more time journeying to a place than you do at the place. So that's the kind of mentality. That's the backbone for this organizational style that I'm doing in this campaign. So I have a map that I've created, and I do it in Photoshop, and I actually have this Photoshop file open during the campaign, and this is actually how I keep track of the different things. And the players are currently along the Olmswalk coast here, and I can zoom in pretty far. And they're leaving from Rye-Hill, and I use this gray marker to kind of locate where the characters are. And so this is Rye-Hill, and I have these yellow dots representing cities, and the yellow dots with the little white aura around them are the major cities. And I have these little green dots here that are representing locations, and this dot here, which is fairly large. And if I right click, I can see Timber Forest locations. This is the swamp/dragon lair. This is the location that they went to find the bodies for the tanner, the leather worker, and fight the black dragon. This is where his lair is. And so I just made a note of that, because that land, though it's healing, is going to have some permanent problems with it from here on out. It was warped, and it had a certain descriptor value to it. So if the players approach this from any way, if they're from the southwest, the south, if they're going from Timra and just say I head north, okay, eventually they might actually run into this forest, and these descriptors will start ringing out, and they'll say, wait, have we been here before? It looks familiar. And they might be trying to cut through the forest to get to Rhyhill to avoid having to go all the way around the forest. And so this is the choice that they can make, and that's a thing that you should be including is, okay, how do you want to get there? I want to get to Rhyhill. I'm in Rhyhill. I want to go to Temra. How do you want to get there? Okay, there is the King's Road that's relatively safe. It will take longer. Or you can cut through the Temra Forest and just head south and try and get there that way. And that kind of leaves the players with this, do I go the more dangerous route, the faster route, or do I take the easy path? And there'll be different problems along the way. So I just have these dots here, and I can right click. This is where Amaz Arrow Moss is located, that mill that was in the second episode. And these dots just represent something, and I can just right click them and just read the little note of what I made. This is what the layer is named in Photoshop, if you want to know how to do this. And so that's just how it's done. When I started describing a river, I just went ahead and painted a river on the map and determined that's where its location is. And it's just helpful reminders. Now, I'm not showing the players this during the session. I'm just using this as a frame of reference for me. And as they move to Lesage, which is this yellow dot right here, if I right click, it's just labeled town right now, but I know where it is because I have got a separate note that shows me the order of the towns. But this is how this works. This is how you can keep track of their movement day by day, and I guess I can show you how I do that as well. I have a grid that I throw on there, and the grid represents 1 day of travel. So if they're right here, roughly this far off the grid, when they move from here to here, that would be a single day of travel. Easy. And along the way, they see things and encounter things, and that makes up the journey. So we spent the entire session covering 2 days of this 6-day leg of this journey. We went into Huntington, and it turned out that they encountered a couple of merchants making camp the first night who informed them that there were rats and their livestock going missing, which the merchants assumed that the livestock was just diseased, and they weren't telling anybody. The livestock was just going missing. That was very strange to them, and there wasn't an apparent cause. So maybe the livestock's sick and you shouldn't eat the meat. Well, they found out that wasn't the case. And that's important too. Understand from your NPC's perspective what they think is going on. And it kind of allows the players to filter out, to be sort of pseudo investigators, and okay, this guy's saying this guy's saying this, and this guy's saying this, and we're seeing this. So with all that information, we can determine, okay, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. This guy doesn't know what he's talking about. This guy's kind of right, and we agree with him. Let's go down this road and see what happens. So they're in Huntington, and in the first night they encountered some rats, and the druid Melindra managed to catch one with the help of the divination wizard. and interrogate it. Now, speak with animals. You don't think about it, but hey, speak with animals is on the field. You need to be ready when anytime you introduce an animal or a tree or anything. Be ready to RP anything. They are all characters in your story. They all have a behavior. So, the panicked rat, it's caught. And what does it sound? It makes a lot of squeaks and stuff, and it's trying to get away. It doesn't want to be in this position. So when she starts talking to it, it is panicked. It's scared, and it just wants to get away, and it's going to say anything to get away. Anything. And, not much torture required to get information out of a rat, I tell you that. Well, and so that's what happened, and they learned of the Rat Man. The started gathering some clues. Well, she turned into a rat, and she goes into the little rat hole and goes and sees the Rat Man, the Rat King that they began to call him. Well, she sees him as a man, but they say sometimes he's a rat, sometimes he's a man, sometimes he's a rat man. So she takes this information back, and one of the characters is like, is this a lycanthropy? We don't know, but there's a wizard's tower in town. They go there in the middle of the night, and he's helpful. He says, yeah, it makes sense that this could be lycanthropy. So another NPC is kind of validating what the player said. Yes, this is very likely that it's lycanthropy. So maybe this is what you need to know about lycanthropy. Now, there's a lot of different ways of trying to trick and surprise your players and everything. But one of the cool things you learn in playing just a little bit of Witcher 3 is the investigation, the knowing your enemy, walking into every situation under complete surprise around every corner is not healthy. It is not what any tactical team will do. They get intel, and they learn what their enemy is. They learn how to defeat it, and then they'll execute it. Well, they learn that lycanthropy, werewolves and stuff they're immune to non-magical weapons. What this means is, if they take a look at their group, several of their members are not going to be able to do anything to hurt this guy. However, a few of them realize, oh, I've got exactly the tool that I need to hurt this guy. Cool. Well, that allows them to make an informed decision. Do we want to go after this guy or not? Well, there's a couple of different ways into the area, which their artificial intelligence was able to get a slight topographical scan of the area, and through that scan, through the nature of the technology she has available to her, was able to gather a map of the tunnels, a very crude map of the tunnels, and allow them to see there's an entrance over here and there's an entrance over here. And so they went to the farm, got on the farm, and found these patches of grass when they dug them up and went down. Immediately encountering the Yankees, 4 of them, who burrowed out and began attacking them, which ended up being a very close fight. Now, they also encountered a ship that was down there, a submerged ship in the waterways that was beneath the town, which they had mentioned that this town was once a river. There was once a river that flowed through here, and it dried up and eventually changed and became what it is today. Writing a little bit of history for each area, kind of just spot checking your history. Like, okay, how did this town become this town? How did this area become this area? Just writing a little bit of history just helps add a lot of depth to each area as they walk through it. And it goes a long way to for each area to say, oh, this area wasn't always this area. This area was Gitlia. This area was Rhizome. That's where Rye Hill comes from. You know, there's a progression here. It wasn't always this place. This place, you know, is relatively recent. And again, you know, you do not have to do all this to make a successful campaign. I certainly, this is my first time attempting it. This is my first time trying it. It's fun for me to do, and the players seem to be very receptive to it. This level of detail and this story. You know, I tend to tell a more serious story. It's not to say that serious story cannot have an element of humor and laughter to it. You know, the RPing rats and stuff like that, and it was very it created a lot of laughs at the table, even though we're telling a very serious story. Serious does not mean without humor, without some level of silliness. We're going to see how these players, if they continue towards this Rat King and investigate and determine, you know, how does the story progress. Now if they leave, you know, that story will continue to progress and develop. Just like if they don't ever interface with some of the other stories that I have in store for them, you know, how do those develop? Ultimately, with the sandbox, it's important for them to decide what do they want to do, and what they want to get involved with. They have the option of focusing solely on the story at hand, on getting to Lesage as quickly as possible, getting to the caravan and coming back. How would the NPC react to that? You know, we'll see. Do they take a few extra days to handle some things along the way? This is a medieval world. To expect that somebody is going to go straight to Lesage and straight back with no complications is not really something that's feasible. You know, I would believe that I would have a few extra days to handle some other business that may creep up. But we'll see what these players do. It's all in their hands. I'm only telling them what the world's doing. This is what the world has to offer. And it's up to you to interface with it. So I hope you guys gleaned some tips from this. If you have any questions or anything, you know, just make a post in the comments below. If you like this content, you know, let's go ahead and subscribe and get those notifications going. And we will see you guys again later as we begin session number 5 coming up this week. And session number 5 is a big one because I acquire a villain point. And we'll get into that on the next journal entry and see what these villain points are all about. What can I do with them? What I feel I can do with them? What I feel I can't? And see what's going on from there. All right, we'll see you guys later.